the year goes on, I get closer and closer.
So to learn new skills and to build new acumen.
We can always touch. It's not.
When you get that, then you get a lot more excited about being around children.
Normal, in a sense, with all of the changes.
Or how you can transform your own business.
On developing the whole child, socially, emotionally.
The traditional route of teaching young people
how to set boundaries, because this little victim here needs to know how to.
Doing very well, so they use that term.
Sometimes expanded them to go up to 40 minutes.
All of those things in education, of course, those things are important.
Is going to our heads and our lungs.
The affirmations in the mirror for about 2 minutes.
What did you do in order to get yourself going?
This is amazing.
It happens, what seems to happen quite a bit in our school.
For the families to come, and they
is that really for the child, or is it for us, for the parent?
and doing new things for our brain.
Who's orchestrating everything in this universe?
Which parts of the brain are used?
Based on that map that we have.
See you with your smiling face.
That's all. Thank you very much for allowing me to join you. Namaste to you, my friends.
Hi, welcome everyone to our Spotlight Talk. And I'm so happy to have Dr. Kathleen Friend back with me today. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice. It's so wonderful to be back. I always love talking with you.
And I with you. And just a little plug, I'm really enjoying that new book. You want to tell everybody what the name of it is?
Sure. The latest book in my Greatness Chair series was written with parents and teachers in mind, called The Greatness Chair Solution.
Thank you. I got mine off Amazon, so everybody else, I am really enjoying reading it, and I think you will too. So let's get started today by introducing our wonderful guest. Dr. Kathleen Friend is a child psychiatrist, author, musician, heart rhythm meditation teacher, and an advanced trainer for the Nurtured Heart approach. She currently lives in Tucson, Arizona. Her mission is to expand the paradigm of child psychiatry to embrace a holistic view of mind, body, and spirit. I think that's wonderful. I have a song by that name, of course. She's the author of 2 children's books, The Greatness Chair and Sarah in the Greatness Chair. And actually it's 3, because now you have the Greatness Chair Solution, an 8-week program to help parents and teachers attain the skills set to bring out the best in children and themselves. So welcome again, Kathleen. And for those that don't know me, I am Marianne Harmon from Music with Mare, and I also am in the U.S. I'm in the state of Florida, and I designed the Music with Mare program that uses brain research to put together songs and activities to aid in the total development of children. So one of the things that I get really involved with is how music helps to nurture a child, much as what Dr. Friend talks about, mind, body, and spirit. It's the whole thing put together that's important. And we're focusing today on the infant toddler stage. And Dr. Friend has a very, very big heart, really gets her whole being into what she tries to share with people. And today we're going to talk about how mental health starts a lot earlier than people think. People don't think about, oh, this is a young child and a baby, and that mental health is part of those first few years, but it is. And Dr. Friend, I'd like you to define what pre and postnatal psychology is.
Okay. Now, first of all, I just want to say that this is a huge field and topic, and I'm just gonna touch on some real basic points. And a few times throughout the presentation, I'm just gonna highlight a couple of ideas that I want you to walk away with that that were really aha moments for me. So from a medical point of view, pre and postnatal psychology and medicine really just refers to the time of pregnancy and about up to about 6 months postpartum. And from a medical point of view, all I really learned was, what are the physiologic changes, the hormonal changes that happen, which medicines are safe or unsafe to use in those periods. But one day, and you'll love this, Mayor.
I'm sure. I love a lot of what you say. So
you're gonna love this. You don't know this about. I don't think you know this. So years ago, I kept having this recurring vision that all I wanted to do was to have these groups of pregnant women and sit around and basically sing with them, so they could bond with their babies, with their unborn children. And well, that never happened. But in the process of just dreaming and dreaming about that, because I knew it was so important, I found this organization called APA, and I'll mention that because that is the premier organization for this field. It's got a really long, hard name, APA, Association for Prenatal and Perinatal Psychology and Health. I'll get there later. But the point is that, so I took a certification course with them because I wanted, and some of what I'm going to share with you is what I learned, which for me, I have to say, a lot of aha moments. So just to go more into the psychology part of pre and perinatal, if we just go back to the 20th century, earlier in the 20th century, it was mostly psychoanalysis that was interested in this period. And not all psychoanalytic theory even believed that in utero, that time during pregnancy was important. In fact, many of them really believe that the development of the self and consciousness didn't happen until after birth. But there were exceptions, and I'll go through this. I want to just set this up a little bit, the history just a little, and then we'll jump out.
Please, it's very helpful. Please.
Oh, good. Okay, good. I can get a little nerdy, so I don't want to do that. But
nerd out. Go ahead.
But in researching this talk, I went back to the history too. So, one of the famous psychoanalysts from the early part of the 20th century, Otto Rank, in 1924 wrote a book called The Trauma of Birth. It was a German book. I can't say the German, don't ask me. But at that point, so he and other people were starting to realize that the experience of the child, of the unborn child, was important in shaping their experience postnatally, and that there was a lot of emotional shock associated with birth and subsequent anxiety. So if we fast forward to a little later in the century, like approximately the 1960s, maybe 70s, research with psychedelics began. A lot of people were doing research, a lot of history there that people don't know. And one person in particular, Stanislav Grof, G-R-O-F, Grof, he did a lot of work. And what he discovered was when people had these experiences from the psychedelic medicine, that they were experiencing in utero and birth experiences, and developed a whole theory based on that. Anyway, we're not going into that. It's not the subject, but I'm just showing you we're slowly moving in time to this deeper understanding of what might be happening in utero. But the real key, the real shift came in 1981 when a doctor, Dr. Thomas Verney, who's a Canadian psychiatrist and still alive and active, he wrote a book called The Secret Life of the Unborn Child. And in 1988, David Chamberlain, who passed away just a few years ago, was a very influential California psychologist, published the book Babies Remember Birth. And both of them had independently discovered, especially while working with hypnosis, that people did recall their birth experiences and their in utero experiences. So, and both of these men became very fundamental for shaping and being involved in APA, that organization. So if people have an interest in this field, they're the go-to, and they have a whole education, thing. But here is the punchline. Okay, I'm just going to read this. Babies are conscious and aware, and they have their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences before, during, and after birth. Consciousness, now here's the part that kind of blew me away. Consciousness precedes the brain architecture that supports it. We'll get into that when we talk about memory in our second question. But that was a very radical idea. How can these unborn fetuses, children, babies, how can they bring back these memories when the brain isn't even formed yet? There's no language, there's no words. And I'm going to take a breath and let you interject before I ramble on and on.
No, you keep going. You're laying stuff out very well, and I don't want to interrupt you.
Very good. So we're going to move right into our second question about.
Okay. So let me frame that for people then. Okay. And I had gone to a talk at a conference we have here in Florida, One Goal Conference, and the speaker was Karen Morse Carr, and she wrote the book Ghosts from the Nursery.
Oh,
and
yes.
That's, the book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some of the research in that book just blew my mind. And that's when I started to get interested in this topic. And I think that from a psychiatrist's point of view, you also want to, that when parents know all this information, and it makes a lot of women start to feel guilty. Like, what did I do wrong?
Well, we're going to go there.
We're going to go there. Okay, good. All right. So then let me stay on track with you. So we know, based on what you just said, based on books you've read and mentioned, and the Ghosts from the Nursery book, memory starts in the womb. And I know as a musician, we've heard many of the stories, like the one about the mom whose son had to play his piano repertoire. In order to graduate, you have to play your recital, and you have to play something you've never seen before. And they put the song in front of him, and he'd never seen it before. And when he got home, he said to his mother, I felt like I knew that song. I played it flawlessly. And when he told her the name, the mom said, I played that every day when I was pregnant, and it's just amazing. It's amazing. So following that train of thought, memory starts in the womb. And as trauma starts in the womb, what could cause that?
This is great.
Trauma.
This is a wonderful topic. And let me just say right at the beginning, I may say it a few times, but some of this material can be triggering for people listening to this. There's a tendency for when people hear this, they go, oh my gosh,
Yes.
Okay, so listen, so just straight out, no blame, shame, or judgment here. first of all, we're all doing the best we can. And I want you to understand before I go into this topic, really get clear on this. When I talk about stress and trauma and the effect of on the child, please understand that we all experience momentary stresses during the day or whatever. And that's not what we're talking about here. You know, what I'm really talking about is chronic, unremitting stress. So some people are in that situation, but just rest assured that even if that was the situation, there is so much that can be done later. We'll get to that by the end of the talk. So I want to be really clear. This can bring up lots of unsettled feelings. But the memory, this memory that exists, just to put it in, sort of give it labels, this is called implicit or cellular memory. It's so as opposed to explicit memory, which is the kind of memory like words, just like telling you a story about what happened. Implicit cellular memory doesn't have the words to it, but it is stored in our bodies, and not only in the brain. And there are stories of people who had organ transplants and heart transplants who then experienced the memories and things of the people whose hearts they received. So there was memory in the heart somehow. Okay, so the impact of stress does begin in the womb, and some people might even say earlier, but I'm not expert enough to go there. But prenatal stress affects the brain and behavior through, I don't think we understand all the ways, but there's a couple of ways that we know. First off, when a person is under a lot of stress, there's activation of something called the HPA axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Hypothalamus is in our brain, pituitary is in the brain, adrenals sit on top of our kidneys. And this is a system that orchestrates together the release of primarily cortisol in the body. Okay, now we all have to have cortisol to live. You don't have cortisol, you have Addison's disease and you can die. It's a normal hormone. We're supposed to have it, we need it. There is normal stress that the body has to deal with and respond to. Again, we're talking about chronic, unremitting stress that keeps that system going more than it should. And what has been discovered is that this overactivation in the cortisol system, which is also associated with fear. So fear is another strong emotion that pulls this going. It can interfere with growth. And in fact, as a biologic system, we're either in growth or protection.
And it's a fight or flight produces the cortisol too, right?
Yeah. The cortisol. Yeah, that you're more in the fight or flight, but not necessarily. I mean, cortisol is released under other kinds of stresses that aren't always associated with, negative emotions. But what we're really concerned here is really a lot of, fear and anxiety. And we live in a world right now that is like nonstop pouring this. I mean, it takes a lot to not have a constant diet of this. So the cortisol is a key factor in programming the fetus, baby, and child to be at risk for disease in later life. Excessive cortisol reduces growth and modifies the timing of tissue development in the baby and can have lasting effects on gene expression. So here we go into another mechanism by which trauma is in utero trauma, the mechanism by which it affects the baby is something called epigenetics. And you've probably talked about this in other shows, maybe with other people, but epigenetics simply is we are way more than our genes. We inherit genes from our parents, our ancestors, but the story, that's a very small part of the story. The big story is in how those genes are expressed or not expressed. And that occurs through something called epigenetics. And it's very simple. It's a simple methyl group for these, it's a CH3 group, a methyl group, a simple little molecule that attaches or doesn't attach in a certain part of the gene to allow it to be read or not. It's like, but this epigenetic influences, it's been shown that that's one of the mechanisms of ancestral trauma. And I just want to say one other thing. I'm packing way too much in this talk. I know it's my tendency, but cortisol, especially in the idea of in utero and early life, it's kind of counterbalanced with something called oxytocin, which is called the love hormone. It's normally thought about as the hormone that allows for birth, and uterine contractions and milk production. But even before that, in pregnancy, those levels of oxytocin in the mother affect bonding, and of course music and other activities, raise. So bonding and attachment are so important to also help this oxytocin system really get into gear. What's interesting is that they found that there's studies that shown pregnant women with higher levels of oxytocin during their first trimester bonded more strongly with their babies after they were born. So anyway, and then that affected their behavior post-birth. But and then of course, one more thing, and then the maternal stress, just so you know, seems to affect the way the networks in the brain are set up even before birth. But these things can be modified. So,
yeah, because you wouldn't want a mom getting stressed out about getting stressed out.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm stressed out. Oh, I'm going to hurt the fetus. And you can't be calm all the time. So, a little bit of stress is okay.
Right. And as teachers, because I know the audience here is primarily teachers, the children that are coming into your classrooms. So, a lot of what you're seeing has very, very deep roots. And the way that child is going to interact with you as the teacher is very affected by all these bonding and prenatal influences.
Right. So we know that prenatal has influence on pretty much who that baby's going to be when they come out, and probably has an effect on the type of personality. We know that there's different type personalities that have been defined with babies. Some that are easy going and some that are colicky and etc. So, but once that child is here, and you think about mental health, and then you think, oh, well, they should go talk with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But at that age, that's not what's going to happen, because a baby can't sit down and tell you, this is what's been bothering me this week. So how does a parent identify that, and then have an effect on the child? Because bonding and attachment starts in the womb, and sometimes they're unintended or unwanted pregnancies, and a fetus can feel that if the mother doesn't get over those strong feelings, and then the baby's born and the mom's like, I don't want to attach, so that can cause problems. So
that's a great, that's a really good point, because some of the behaviors in early childhood can make it more challenging for the parent to attach. I mean, like you say, the temperaments can vary a great deal. I want to know. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Other people?
No, people are not putting questions. They're just saying hello.
Hi. Well, hello. Maybe we'll get to a question and answer. But Mare just talked about unintended pregnancies. Now, this is a really shocking statistic, but 40, I don't know where this came from, but somebody who's an expert in this field gave me this number. 40% of pregnancies are unintended. Now, many parents adjust to that, and it's okay. You know what I mean? Whoops, but they're okay. They make the shift, the baby's welcomed, no problem. But for those who don't make that shift, it is very traumatic for the baby. And there was a really interesting study done of children of mothers who were denied abortions, and then they were followed. And well, these children did not, as you might imagine, on many measures of development and functioning, did not thrive. Just to go back, this oxytocin story is really a big one, because if a child's had traumatic experiences, or ACEs, now we call them adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, they also can have very low levels of this oxytocin too. And that disrupts their attachments abilities. And that's why when we get to the end of this talk about activities that can be done, and why what you all do as teachers and parents, especially in these early childhood, why it matters so much. You might think, oh, I'm just singing, or I'm doing this with the child, but you're rewiring their brains. You're changing the field. You're changing the energetic field that child exists in, and changing relationship patterns. So it's a big job. And
in that first, when the child is an infant, if you knew you had a traumatic pregnancy, or the baby came early, or delivered with some kind of trauma, then here you are, you've got this infant. What do you do? What do you do to help the mental health of that child?
Okay. I love this topic. First of all, love.
I was going to say, besides love, right?
Okay.
Hold, eye contact.
Yeah. Okay. So what children, infants and children, they need space. They need unhurried. What children read, they read our energy.
Even infants.
Yes. Oh, especially infants. And so when we are in a state of feeling calmer and safer, then we can enter into that connected place with more oxytocin. The behaviors that tend to naturally come out of that state of what parents have done historically over centuries, rocking a baby, singing, humming, looking in the eyes, all of those things are so important. And holding the baby close, the baby hears the mother's heart, even if they're not breastfeeding, letting them hear the regulating heartbeat of the mother is very organizing to the nervous system. And it's really important I gotta say, it's very important not to overstimulate babies.
Yeah, then people, I think they overcompensate.
Yeah. And I think that we have this sense of, and I know, Mare, we've talked about this before, and I've heard you mentioned this in other talks, that you're always kind of beating the drum for allowing space for a child to unfold. That there's something there's something in the child that will move towards development and maturation and learning. And we want to think of ourselves as a place of setting up an atmosphere or a permissive place for that to occur. We don't have to do everything. There is not, I don't want to give people a to-do list of what they should do to be a good parent of an infant. I really believe that this stuff is in us very naturally, but we have to have our, if you will, our nervous system tuned and in that place for bonding and attachment. Does this make sense?
Yes, and to make this be a little bit more tie in to practical use. And I know this isn't a question, Kathleen, so I don't want to throw you off, but what would be a sign that the mental health of an infant was not so stable? Like a parent might see a child having trouble going to sleep at night and then think, oh my gosh, yeah, I listened to that talk and my baby must have mental issues, so I don't want that to happen. So how does a parent know? What would be a sign that there's some mental instability in an infant?
Well, I have to be honest, I don't even like thinking of those words like mental
I don't either.
instability. I have a little trouble with that language, but what's a sign that a parent can read that the child's nervous system may not be able to integrate what's going on? Okay, looking away. Very simply, looking away. Now, children look away. They're interested. They look around. They're not always staring. But if you're really attempting to connect with your child and they keep looking away, well, you have to consider that one possibility is there's too much stimulation coming in and the child can't integrate it and they're withdrawing.
Okay.
Now, that's not a mental, but you want to be a little sensitive to the level of stimulation, and children differ in their ability. Some children can handle a lot more stimulation than others. So everybody's unique that way. So just to kind of be sensitive to, am I attuning to my baby's ability to take in what's going on? And if a child gets cry, all children cry, and is the parent, the biggest thing is to stay calm. Honestly, the biggest thing, it's kind of simple in a way, is to stay calm in your own being, because that helps regulate the child's nervous system, or what we call co-regulation. And that starts very early. It's happening in utero, it happens infancy, and it happens later. And so part of it is the parents take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get your head out of the way about this, that, and just maybe take some deep breaths into your heart and relax. And don't go quickly to, I must be doing something wrong. And give yourself a little space,
In music class, we have a time at the end of music with Mayor class called Best Baby, and they sing Best Baby, Best Mommy, Best Daddy, just bonding. And there's some parents that at the ripe old age of 10 months will say, oh, my child doesn't like to dance. My child doesn't like to cuddle. And I tell them that not all children grow up just wanting to hug and wanting to cuddle. And it has a lot to do with the parents' personality as well. So if you're somebody that doesn't like to cuddle, you're probably going to have a child that doesn't like to cuddle.
Yeah.
However, you can teach each other to enjoy cuddling moments, you know, and take a moment to just dance with your child and hold them and let them hear from you. I love this. I love having you in my arms and moving to the music and singing about how much I love you. And even if the first time it lasts 30 seconds and then that child wriggles away, maybe the next time it'll last 45. You know, so sometimes these things need to be taught.
Beautiful because you know, you don't know the state of that mother or father's nervous system and their history, and they may be these people with lower levels of oxytocin too. So you're learning. Yeah, I love that idea of learning. You're growing together. I mean, that's what parents and children do. You know, it's not like parents have you've got it all figured out. I mean, it's like you're growing each other.
Yes. So,
yeah.
You believe that some people might consider that a challenging behavior. Oh, my child, I try to pick him up to cuddle with him and he runs away, kicks, or punches at my shoulder. No. You know, so why is it important to teach, have no shame or blame attitudes and assume shame or blame attitudes and assume everyone doing their best is what you had said to me.
Yeah. And also, yeah.
A clearer picture, please.
Right. And for the child that's, you know, does that. Okay. So you want to be sensitive to the fact that in that moment, the child isn't ready to take it in. And you know, you don't want to always push past that, you know what I mean? But you just wait for a little bit of calming, quieter time.
Yeah. Dr. Kathleen froze for a moment, but I'm sure she'll be right back. But you know what she's getting at here is that sometimes the child might not be in the mood to hug, but you are. So you have to follow their lead. You froze, so I was trying to fill in what I.
Oh yeah, you got it. Like, you know, we don't want to just like override the.
Yeah. So you want to acknowledge that they might not want to be doing this
in that moment.
Yeah. But we can do it later. Okay. So I don't know what's going on. You're getting some patchy internet there. So I am going to talk about that for a second and then talk about what our final question is and how you're going to leave us with some ideas that promote activities that promote safety and strengthen the nervous system. And it's all about that nervous system and getting it strengthened. So you are going to recommend to us some activities that parents can do to strengthen.
Yes. So singing.
Yes, of course.
And humming. So not everybody, a lot of people are not comfortable singing. They've been told, they've gotten a message, I can't sing, I can't hum. Humming stimulates the vagus nerve, which is part of also the connection and attachment, social engagement network. We don't have time to go into that, but humming, simply humming is very good. Going out into nature, quiet time, rocking, just in general rhythmic activities that we do with children, and you know, all of those things really set a very nice tone. Rhythm. I think rhythm is really important.
Yes.
In fact, I think that a healthy rhythm is the basis of health in general. And so, of course, music, one of the big elements in music is rhythm. And, that's one of the major elements here. But that doesn't mean like loud beating drums, or I mean, it's you gotta know the child you're dealing with. And anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
I talk about that in my TED talk on building brains with music. Howard Gardner says that music is the first of the multiple intelligences to awaken. Right?
The rhythm of the mother's heart in utero.
Yes.
And I think you said that, but it's true. The first sound that we hear is the beating of our mother's heart.
Yes. And that steady beat that regulates our heart and eventually gives us balance.
Yeah.
So that we can hold up our head, pull up our bodies, all of that. I think that one of the most important things, we're winding down here, is that parents understand that babies do have mental health. It is something you will notice right from birth, and can affect before birth. Before birth, you can't see it, but you might be able to feel it a little bit. But once that baby is born, you follow its lead, give it what it needs,
True. And so just a parting thing would be this idea that the prenatal life has such a significant impact on all the activities, and the birth experience has so much impact on subsequent development and what you see and how children tend to react.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, I want you to. I was just going to say, what would you like your closing?
Yeah. So how could I have forgotten this? But okay, so when you're dealing with a child, honestly, later, or a baby, tell the baby what's happening. So let's just say a child has had a really difficult birth experience. A lot of mothers do experience that in modern Western approaches to birth.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty traumatic for a lot of women. You think, the baby's not going to understand. They don't understand my words. They don't have the brain development. No. Tell them, wow, mommy, had to go to work today, and I really wanted to be with you, but I had to go to work. But I'm here now with you, and it's important to just talk about what happened. Or, I had a hard time with birth. I know it was hard for you, but that was then and this is now. It's just an acknowledgement. And we're not going to put bad ideas in the kids' heads, to just acknowledge the stuff that's happened. Or, I know you heard, God forbid, mommy and daddy yelling at each other when you were in my tummy. And, and it happens. We're humans. And I'm sorry about that. We loved you. We still loved you anyway. And we had a rough day. That stuff matters. It goes in. I learned that from Appa.
Really? I would not have thought like that.
I know, right?
That you would acknowledge that you were fighting. I would think that, that's different. We really would love if anybody has a question, because we are just about finished here. And Dr. Kathleen would love if someone would have a question or two so she can answer it. I don't have to be the only one asking questions here. She has so much information. You have a website for the Greatness Chair and all the information that goes with it, or your heart, nurturing heart.
Yeah, my website's not real up to date, honestly, but I do have a website, greatnesschair.com. And then drfriend.net is another one. They're both woefully out of date. But
been busy writing a book, have you?
Yeah. So my website, greatnesschair.com, doesn't even have, I think, the next 2 books, but it does give you an email, a way to contact me on that website. And also just drfriend.net also has sort of a customer link or something, a way to reach me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I don't see anyone coming in with any questions. So you must have been really clear about everything you were saying. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And we hope that you learned something. I know that I did. And I want to thank Dr. Kathleen because she always has such wonderful information. So I encourage you to go to her website. We'll see you next week for another spotlight. And then we will have 2 weeks off while people celebrate Passover, Palm Sunday, Easter, and today's the beginning of Ramadan. So we want to wish everyone to have a nice, peaceful Ramadan. And thank you for tuning in. Bye.